This is New Home Insights, the John Burns Real Estate Consulting Podcast. I'll be your host, Dean Worley. As the title promises, we're going to bring you insights into everything housing, latest trends, innovations, observations, and issues of the day. We'll bring in colleagues here at John Burns and also some major industry players from all across the country. This podcast is going to be quick, fun, but also hopefully make you think. So see you here every couple of weeks. Now let's get to it. Welcome, everyone, to yet another episode of New Home Insights by John Burns Real Estate Consulting. I'm your host, Dean Worley. Today, we have another extremely special, maybe almost too special of a guest, Rick Palacios. Rick, say hi.
Hey, Dean. How are you?
I'm good. Today, we're going to talk with Rick about single-family rental, the market, the sector, the shape of it, where it's going, what's happening, what kind of insights do we have about single-family rental. So let's start off with one of the, I guess, misconceptions is that single-family rental has been around for a very long time and is maybe a bigger part of the market than folks realize.
Yeah, I think, and this is fresh for me because I was just out at, there's now an industry group that is formed around the single-family rental space called the National Rental Home Council. And so I was out in D.C. for their first ever event, talking through some of these things. And I think what they are trying to do is exactly what you just brought up, is to overcome some of these misperceptions. And I think everybody has really focused in on the institutional investors that have come in over the last probably decade or so and driven a lot of the press. But the reality is that those guys are really just 1%, maybe 1.5% of the 16 million single-family rental homes across the country. So ton of press, ton of headlines, a lot of it sometimes negative, but the reality is just such a small fraction of the market. And then the other thing too is that, to your point on how this industry has been here really forever, if you look at just the market share of rental homes across the country, single-family rentals have been between 30 and 35% of all rental properties for the better part of 50, 60 years. Yeah. So it's not new. It's just that some of the names that are getting involved in the industry are new.
So it's really been dominated by the moms and pops who have...
Yeah, we've got some interesting stats around this. And so when you say mom and pop, I think a lot of people think owners that have maybe 1 to 2 properties that they've just held on to. And so again, of that 16 million pie single-family rental homes, 80% are owned by people that have just 1 to 2 homes that they're got as investments and renting out. Another 9% are for people that own 3 to 5 homes. So you look at that, and 90% of the market is owning between 1 and 5 homes. So that's it's again, that surprises a lot of people because you never really hear about those stats. You only hear about the private equity names that have come into the space and gotten more involved.
Do you have any stats on what proportion of single-family rental are used to grow weed? Any insight?
So I think if you maybe talk to some of our consultants up in Portland, Denver, they may be able to have some of that insight.
Let's say you're picking on Portland and Denver.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's legal in California now, so I don't know. Maybe up in the Bay Area, you'll be able to get some color for us on that.
I want to immediately apologize to all our Portland and Denver listeners right now for Rick. Rick said it. I just let him into it. So do you see, though, a growth trajectory for those larger institutional buyers to 1 and 1.5% of the market share? I mean, is that inevitably going to go up?
Yes, I can say, matter of fact, it is going to go up. I think what those groups have found is just a insanely fragmented industry that they have been able to come in and bring operational efficiencies to, and a lot of that too. I think the presence of institutional investors and now companies like Invitation Homes, American Homes for Rent, Tricon American Homes, owning between 10,000 and up to 80,000 homes. What has really allowed for them to do that is just the technology that exists, cloud computing, being able to do everything on your phone, apps. If those things weren't here, they would not have been able to come in and add value into the marketplace.
Yeah. So they really treat it like they were a large apartment owner developer. They just their units are not in complexes. They're dispersed around various metro areas.
Exactly. And that was the that was the pushback that they got from investors and those that were skeptical on you cannot replicate what the multifamily space did. And I think what they realized is, yes, we can. And the way that we're going to do it is by leveraging technology that hasn't existed. And so you can take, like you said, homes that are miles and miles apart, cities apart, and be able to replicate a model that is very similar to what the multifamily space has done.
I'm going to ask you in a minute about that. Let's stay for a second here. Let's stay on the other end of it. So in terms of the growth and market expansion, do you see now not just the share from the institutional players growing? Do you see the whole sector as a whole growing?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, what we've seen too, and also, if you were to rewind the clock 10 years, 15 years, if you were looking to rent a single family home, you had to do it through platforms like Craigslist or looking in the newspaper.
Or driving around.
I mean, that seems insanely archaic now that you think about it.
It is.
Versus now, you Google rent a home in any city, and these groups that we just talked through all come up immediately. And the user interface is insanely simple. It's very similar to if you go on a home builder's website, large home builder, you can click through the different cities across the country where they have homes, look at the homes. So the simplicity of it all has just gotten so much better, which I think for us gives us confidence that directionally you're going to see increased market share for single family rental.
But the mechanism, I guess, will have to be them, since the owners are right. Originally, they grew by buying a lot of the distressed properties, right?
Yep.
Now, it's a much slower process, and it is essentially buying from. Is it mostly buying from the mom and pops? Is that how they're growing?
Yeah. So there is not a lot of distress in the market. I mean, that is one of the reasons that the institutional investors were able to come in is that they saw a massive investment opportunity in being able to buy thousands and thousands of homes below replacement costs back in the depths of the downturn. And now a lot of that distress has gone out of the marketplace, aside from maybe if you're in some of the judicial states where they're still seeing foreclosures come through because it takes forever. And so they are having to go to the traditional MLS to look for inventory. The issue there, as a lot of people listening to this probably know, is that there is not a lot of resale supply across the country. I think there's about 3 months of supply. And if you drill down below the median home price, because a lot of the single family rental operators want to go to below median home price for the properties that they're purchasing because it allows them to get a yield that makes sense. The inventory levels are shaved in half for those price points. So it is becoming increasingly hard to come across organic ways of growing their platforms, which is one of the reasons why we've seen a more of a push into what we're calling the build for rent space.
Build for rent space. Okay, let's come back to that in a minute. Also, do you see though? Is there the potential to have a little bit of a backlash from buyers at large, because to some extent these institutional, if they're going after the same homes, especially at the entry level niche, are they going to the same homes for those buyers who are looking for affordable product are going for? Do you see, is there any possibility you think of having some kind of political repercussions?
I mean I think you can make the claim that yes, there is supply that is getting sucked out of the for sale market because of the continued emergence of the single family rental asset class. But at the same time too, I mean, going back to our comment on how institutional investors 1% of the overall market, you go into a market like Atlanta, which I think is probably the poster child for the single family rental industry. It's the biggest market for most of the institutional names in the space. One of the markets we saw a ton of distress during the downturn. In a market like Atlanta, it's still only 5% of all single-family rental homes are owned by the institutional investors. Yeah. So,
but don't they have the potential, right? You can see. I have already heard whispers that that's one of the reasons we are so strapped for inventory in the resale environment is because the single-family home folks bought up all that distressed. Just politically, you could see those folks being more convenient targets for that kind of antagonism. The mom and pops aren't. They're so dispersed and diverse. But the big institutional single family guys could be.
I think again also because of the bad press that's been written around it. I mean, I think there was a panel recently where the title of it was "Wall Street's Your Landlord," but I mean the reality though is that I have a lot of friends that are in their mid to late 30s that are homeowners, and they are falling into these mom and pop investors, and I think an increasing amount are where their primary house they've bought and they've got it at 3.5% mortgage rate. They've paid off a lot of the principal on their mortgage, and when they go to move into a move-up home, they're going to keep their existing home as a rental property because they realize that they're able to have that low mortgage rate. So I think that again, just in terms of who are the culprits here, it's really the mom and pops that are driving this industry.
Okay. So that would argue that the mom and pops are going to be just as much a part of the overall growth in single family rental as the institutional.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
Let's talk about the sort of the motivations. Why are users, renters in this case, renting single family, both positive and negative?
Yeah. So I think that one of the primary drivers for this is that coming out of the downturn, there were a lot of people that foreclosed, had a delinquency, and just could not purchase a home even if they wanted to. And so what do you do if you're at that life stage where you have children, want to be in a school district? And so what we've seen is that the single family rental operators are prioritizing being in those communities where they can offer homes that are in those good school districts. And so you create an option that really didn't existed for that person that still wants to stay in that school district. And so that's I think one of the big drivers for the industry. I think the second part too is that we increasingly hear that the consumer wants flexibility. And so they may not want to be burdened with a mortgage knowing that they're job hopping and they're pushing their careers. And so being able to go and find a home to rent and have it be such an easier process than say maybe 10, 15 years ago, it allows them to have that flexibility to where maybe it didn't exist before. I think flexibility is probably one of the biggest components of it.
So you can see them competing with the for sale sector, right? That family rent, they're a renter, they're starting to have that life stage, so they're going to move to the suburbs, let's say, so they can rent in the suburbs with that great school district if they're not ready to buy in the suburbs.
Yeah, I hear people. I do think that yes, that there is a component of that too. That maybe in some ways they're taking people from the for sale market, but at the same time too. I mean, a lot of the stats that we follow on, say, the percentage of people that are renting a single family home that then go to move out to buy a home, those statistics don't really change massively. I think the big operators that we talk to and that report this, it's about 30% or so of their tenants are going to buy a home, and it stays around that. It doesn't change massively.
How about, okay, so let's go back into the other end that we've touched on a minute ago. What are some of the, I guess, just the advantages, the positives from being a single family rental actor and developer? You mentioned technology. What are the other things? You can expand on technology perhaps, but what are other things that are making it easy?
Yeah. So one of the things that has stood out, and it sounds like such a no-brainer now that you think about it, is obviously we pay a lot of very close attention to what's going on in the home builder side and for sale. And one of the things that the rental operators have been doing since the get-go is something as simple as allowing people interested in looking at their properties to access them 24/7 for the most part. And the way that they've been able to do that is by putting lock boxes or key codes on the homes. And so, Dean, you want to go out and look at a house, they will send you a code. I believe you have to give them your credit card so that you don't go into the place and tear it up, which you might do.
I might. Twice, Rick, twice. I've done
okay.
That, okay, that's
I think 3 times, and they don't let you do it anymore.
Okay, that's fair.
So something as simple as that, just from a consumer standpoint, allows them to do it much easier. And it's interesting. When I was out in DC this week, went and met with a home builder on my second day there, and they are now rolling this through as a trial in some of their projects. So 24/7 consumer can go and look. And so that is just such an easy thing that makes total sense because as you know, on the home building side, sales offices are open, 8 a.m., 5 p.m.?
The wrong hours and not enough of them.
Yeah.
Because resale agents have done the lockbox thing forever. So
yeah, and because as a consumer, I mean, as the profile that's buying your homes on the builder side, you hope they have jobs, and if they have jobs, they probably can't get there between the working hours for the most part. So those are the simple things that we've seen.
So a lot of it is going to be technology, but also just the ability to just, I guess that does make it more difficult. And they have to figure out ways. I mean, to the degree it's different from apartments, it's the dispersion, the physical dispersion of their product, quote unquote, versus apartments. So having things like lock boxes and
so you bring up a really good point. One of the other things that really makes sense for this industry is scale, and so operational leverage. So you don't want. So it's hard enough having your homes miles and miles apart, and so in order to really make this business work, and we've seen this with some of the consolidation in the space, is that you really need to hit a threshold of scale at an MSA level for the larger guys for this to really get dialed in operationally. And so I think we've heard at least several thousand homes in an MSA to where they can really get things dialed in operationally and hit the returns that make sense for them.
That's a good segue then to the other flip of the coin is what are some of the challenges or drawbacks to this sector as an operator?
It's the things that any landlord has experienced. And I remember a few years ago listening in on some of the earnings calls for the public guys, and they were talking about how simple things like they had abnormally warm weather in a region that they had exposure to, and the grass died in mass across thousands of properties. And so that was an operational cost that they couldn't really model in, and so they had to convey that to their investors. So those are some of the pain points that as a landlord you experience, but then multiply that by 80,000 homes. And I say 80,000, that's the largest operator, so that wasn't for all of them. But
thousands of homes. Hundreds in a metro area, yeah.
Yeah, and so I think the hardest thing for them really is predictability and visibility around operating costs going forward. And so one of the other things that we've noticed more and more doing is going from, say, when they have to turn a home, so a tenant leaves, there may have been carpet in it initially. And so what we're noticing is that more and more of the larger operators are tearing out carpet just because the costs of having to do it over and over again are cumbersome. And so they're switching to more hard, resilient flooring throughout the entire house.
That's a win-win, right? The tenant is going to view that.
Oh, consumer loves it.
They love that. And yet it's actually a cost win for the operator as well. That's a good idea.
Yeah, because so upfront for an operator, yes, costs more. Yeah. But it allows them to model in consistency in their operational costs.
And they can market it like this just because we love you.
Yeah.
The goodness of our hearts.
So I mean, really, it's. But think about mom and pop landlords. So that's why also, I think there's a lot of advantages with the institutional people coming into space because they're thinking along those lines. Whereas a mom and pop landlord, a lot of times is not really the best landlord.
Are they not having that kind of a long-term view or that kind of a scaled view?
Yeah.
So they're not going to, they have 3 homes. They're not going to replace all 3 homes with hardwood because they think the tenant's going to be there for years. It's not something
And they're trying to minimize the cost that they have to shell out for their tenants. And a lot of times you get slumlords, I'm sure, in those situations. And there's one story that I remember. So Hurricane Harvey last year in Houston, one of the larger operators in the space owns thousands of homes, publicly traded, and they were able to almost immediately go in, infuse millions and millions of dollars into the homes that they had tenants in to fix and improve things that you're not going to see that from a mom and pop rent.
Certainly not in mass. At most, hit and miss. Yeah.
Yep. So there's definitely advantages.
How about any just sort of key insight you see in the single family world that we haven't talked about?
Yeah, no, I would say that one of the emerging areas, especially from an acquisition channel perspective, I know we were talking about earlier how it's getting harder and harder to find supply to add into their portfolios. One of the things that we've noticed probably over the last year or two is that there has become a trend of the larger single-family rental operators building new product to go into the rental market to add into their portfolios. And we're also noticing an increasing amount of home builders across the country that are selling some of their homes to these rental operators to add into their portfolios. And there's a win-win for the builders as well as the rental operators that are doing it from what we've found.
So it's two prongs to that, and let's quickly let's look at build to rent. Is there any? I mean, I won't say who, but there is the potential there when the builder executes that and does a community as a build to rent, that they're not really prepared for essentially the rental world. The churn rate in terms of the tenants moving out and so on, and the upkeep for every time someone does move out. Do you see that as a special challenge for those?
So I think when you think along the lines of a large home builder that may have done it on a one-off, yes, I totally agree. But I think what we're seeing is that these are rental operators that are building new, and their specialty as a business is renting those homes out. And so what we're finding is that they're, I would say, more prepared for some of the headaches that you may have come across on the consulting side on some of these one-off things that have happened across the country.
So they're going to staff up. They're going to hire folks from the apartment world, presumably, in terms of management and in terms of the metrics they need to study and things like that.
So they're following a lot of the metrics and analytics that the multifamily world has followed. And I mean, to now to the point where we're seeing fully amenitized single-family for rent communities in a lot of the major markets in the country.
Are they using YieldStar to set their rents? And what's the other one? I can't. Oh my God! As a consultant trying to get comparable rents, we hate you, YieldStar. I totally get it, but it makes our life a living hell.
Yeah. So, and I think we hear little anecdotes all the time about the benefits for builders doing this, the benefits for rental operators doing this. One of the more interesting things that I heard a few weeks ago from a home builder that is selling homes to the rental operators is that if they know going into a land deal that their sales rates are going to be significantly higher than their competitors because they're baking in, say, up to 10% of that community being taken down by a rental operator, that they can go in, underwrite to assumptions that none of their home builder competitors can, which allows them to get that deal.
So we'll see those relationships start to form between institutional and new home builders. Will the new home builders just have to be a little bit careful about perceptions in that community?
Yes.
Fair or not? Usually not fair, but
well, I think that is the issue, that there is that perception, the renter stigma. Exactly. But I think what we say to that, and we've done the research around this, is that 10 to 15% of most new home communities are already having renter tenants in those homes.
And aren't their income profiles often exactly the same as the
$100,000 income?
Yeah,
that's the other stat that I think surprises a lot of our home builder clients, is that for some of the public rental operators, the household income for their tenants is $100,000. Yeah.
Anything else you want to? Have we covered single family rental? I hope for you, the listener, we've covered single family rental adequately, if not better. And I as for folks in Portland and Denver, we did talk about weed. So you're welcome.
We can rewind back to that part. Yeah.
Let's recap real quick on single family rental. It's a perhaps surprisingly large segment of the market already. It's dominated not by the big institutional players, but by the mom and pops. Yes, we think the institutional players are going to grow, but a big chunk of the growth is going to be from more mom and pop ownership in the single family rental sector as well. The users are there both because in some reasons they have to be in the rental landscape, but other times it's about flexibility and about controlling cost and about about just convenience too, I think. And also, what's a big part of what makes it easier to be a single family operator is technology and being able to do things that you couldn't do even 10, 15 years ago. And last, that we do see this emerging sector of build to rent going forward. I think that's going to be a bigger part of the landscape there as well. Rick, appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Dean.
Very insightful, which is good because our name here is New Home Insights. So that's important to do that. You can find us on our website, realestateconsulting.com. We also have a Twitter @JBREC. I think you can also find us on MySpace and AOL, and I believe Prodigy.net. Where else? Richard?
Can you download the podcast on Napster?
Napster. Yes, we're on Napster as well. I think we are. So thanks for listening. Until next time.